In Iowa City, a Toyota Camry had been left for weeks beneath the shade of roadside trees. When police opened the trunk, they discovered the remains of a 19-year-old Chinese exchange student who had attended Iowa State University.
She was last seen in Iowa City September 8th. Police are not saying how she died. Tong Shao's body was found in the trunk of her own vehicle on Friday. Iowa City police now say they are looking for a person of interest.
He fled the United States with a carefully planned escape, but justice eventually caught up with him, sealing his fate with a life sentence that ended his desperate attempt to run. The story begins with Tong Shao, born in 1994 in the port city of Dalian, a bustling coastal metropolis in northeastern China with a population of over 6 million. She was the only child of Chong Xiang and Yang Shu, a hardworking, loving, and close-knit family. From an early age, Tong showed exceptional talent in both academics and the arts. She was creative, eager to learn, and had a sharp, analytical mind. Outside of school, she played the piano, took dance classes, and often performed at school events. She dreamed of one day becoming a biologist or a sculptor, but her family and friends believed Tong could achieve anything she set her mind to. In her teenage years, she was not only the pride of her parents, but also a shining example of determination, discipline, and an unwavering desire to reach beyond her world. Tong Shao earned a coveted spot at Dalian Yuming Senior High School, one of the most prestigious high schools in the city, where only top-performing students were admitted. The school was renowned across China for producing many students who achieved high scores on the National College Entrance Examination, commonly known as the Gaokao, a test considered one of the most crucial turning points in a Chinese student's life. Those who achieved exceptional results could even be admitted directly to university without taking the notoriously difficult exam. At that time, Tong's boyfriend had been accepted into a prestigious university in China, while she did not achieve the results she had hoped for. Despite her tireless efforts, Tong couldn't help but feel disappointed, as if her carefully planned future had suddenly become uncertain, forcing her to rethink her next steps and the academic path she would pursue. Failing the Gaokao also meant the end of Tong Shao's current relationship. But instead of giving up, she chose a stronger path, a major turning point in her life. Determined to step out of her comfort zone and pursue her dreams, Tong began planning to move to the United States to study at Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa, where she intended to major in chemical engineering, a field that demanded persistence and sharp logical thinking. Her parents, who had always believed in and supported her, did not hesitate to invest their entire life savings, about $100,000, to help her realize her dream of studying abroad. Before departing, Tong needed to complete the English proficiency test for foreign students, scheduled for July 2011 in Beijing. During her preparation for the exam, she met Li Xiangnan, a young student from China who was also studying English with the same goal, to pursue higher education in the United States at the Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT, in New York. From their very first conversations, Tong Shao and Li Xiangnan quickly discovered many things in common. Both were preparing for the journey of studying abroad. Both carried the same ambition to build a new future in the United States. And both understood the mix of excitement and anxiety that came with leaving home. This shared connection drew them closer, and they soon began talking frequently, sharing their study plans and dreams. Not long after, Tong's parents had the chance to meet Li Xiangnan. Although their first impression of him was that he was polite, calm, and somewhat reserved. They felt the two might not be well suited for each other in the long run. A few of Tong's close friends shared similar feelings, describing Lee as introverted and difficult to approach. However, Tong reassured everyone that her relationship with Lee was casual and uncommitted. Both of them were still focused on their studies and future plans, not seeing each other as an official couple. By September 2012, Tong Shao officially began her studies at Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa, marking the start of the overseas journey she had always dreamed of. From her very first semesters, Tong quickly proved her outstanding ability, consistently earning excellent grades and easily adapting to her new environment. Friends recalled that outside of classes, she often joined dance lessons, attended student gatherings, and occasionally taught Chinese to her American classmates. Her cheerful, kind, and humble personality made her well-liked by everyone around her. She was especially close to her dorm roommates. Although she was the oldest among the three, her petite frame, standing just about 5 feet 2 inches tall, earned her the affectionate nickname, Little Sister. Her closest roommate, Jean, once said that Tong was so smart it drove people crazy, because even though Tong always insisted she needed to study more, she still consistently earned straight A's and topped her classes. While Tong's life in the U.S. was becoming more stable and filled with positive energy, Li Xiangnan continued to stay in touch with her from afar. However, before long, he began to struggle with the nearly 1,000-mile distance between them. On an impulsive decision, Li applied to transfer from the Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT, in New York to Iowa State University, so he could be closer to Tong. Because the transfer happened so suddenly, he didn't have a permanent place to stay and his classes hadn't yet started, so he temporarily moved in with Tong and her roommates. At first, everyone tried to remain polite and accommodating, but after just a few weeks, the situation became uncomfortable. Lee rarely interacted with anyone, made little effort to fit in, and left trash scattered around the apartment. Worse, he began showing possessive behavior. He didn't want Tong going out, constantly asked where she was, and questioned who she was with. Although she still insisted that they were not officially a couple, Tong started to feel exhausted and suffocated by his excessive control, a tension that slowly turned their fragile relationship into a heavy and strained one. Nearly 2 years after Tong Shao began her studies at Iowa State University, her life appeared stable and promising on the surface. She continued to maintain excellent grades, participated in campus activities, and remained well-liked by her peers. Meanwhile, Li Xiangnan had finally moved out of the shared apartment, found his own place, and officially registered for his classes. This change brought a sense of relief to Tong's roommates, as the atmosphere in their apartment became much more comfortable. However, Tong's relationship with Li grew increasingly distant. She began confiding in her friends that she wanted to end things with him completely, so she could focus on her future and live the life she truly desired. Yet instead of accepting her decision, Li seemed to grow more obsessive. One incident occurred when he was stopped by traffic police for a road violation and listed Tong Shao's address as his own residence. This caused great discomfort for Tong and her roommates, as they soon began receiving letters and official notices related to the incident. The ongoing disturbance left them uneasy, to the point where they no longer wanted to mention Li's name and made it clear that he was no longer welcome to return to the apartment. On September 3, 2014, Tong Shao had a heartfelt conversation with a male friend she had recently grown close to. They had been talking for some time, and a special connection was beginning to form between them. A hopeful new chapter after the long, tense period with Li Xiangnan. During that conversation, Tong confided that her relationship with Li had become heavy and complicated, that she was unhappy and had wanted to end it for a while. However, since they had previously planned a short weekend trip together, she decided to go through with it, intending to have a final conversation and settle everything once she returned. She told her friend that it would be her chance to close that chapter and officially start anew. 4 days later. On the evening of September 7th, Tong's father, Tong Shao, sent her a message to check in. Tong had mentioned earlier that she had lost her glasses and was looking for a replacement, so he simply asked whether she had gotten a new pair. The reply he received was unusually brief and carried a strange tone. She said she had borrowed one from a friend. When he suggested a video call so they could talk face to face after many days apart, Tong replied that she was busy and quickly ended the conversation. The curt, distant response left him with an uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. In the early morning hours of September 8th, 2014, one of Tong's roommates received a strange text message from Li Xiangnan's phone at about 1:30 a.m. The message read, "Hey, I'm still in Iowa City, but I lost my phone, so I'm using Li's. He has a family emergency and might have to fly back to China today, so I'm taking a bus to Minnesota to visit some friends. I'll be back in a week. I have Li's phone with me, but the battery is almost dead." On the morning of Monday, September 8th, 2014, Tong Shao's roommates began to feel uneasy when they realized she still hadn't returned home, even though she had important classes scheduled that day at Iowa State University. At first, they thought she might have stayed somewhere overnight or made a last-minute change of plans. But as the day went by with no messages, calls, or any sign of contact, concern quickly turned into worry. In the following days, that worry grew into real fear. All of Tong's close friends, both at school and online, tried to reach her, but her phone remained off, and no one had seen her at any class or campus event. Her close friend and roommate John decided to double-check the information from the message she had received, where Tong supposedly said she was going to Minnesota. Jean contacted a few friends there through social media, but all of them confirmed they hadn't heard from Tong, nor did they know she had any plans to visit. At that point, the roommates began to realize something was seriously wrong. A cheerful, punctual, and responsible person like Tong would never disappear without telling anyone. By September 18th, 2014, after more than a week with no word from her and growing concern, Tong Shao's roommates decided to file a missing person report with the Ames, Iowa Police Department. At first, authorities suspected that Tong might have temporarily left school due to homesickness or returned to China to visit her family, something not uncommon among international students. However, when investigators checked immigration records, they found no indication that Tong had left the United States, nor was there any evidence that she had boarded a bus to Minnesota, as the earlier text message claimed. Detectives began reviewing all of her recent contacts and quickly reached out to the male friend Tong had spoken with just days before she disappeared. He cooperated fully with police and confirmed that their relationship was still very new and limited to friendly conversations. He stated he had no knowledge of Tong planning any trip and hadn't received any messages from her after September 3rd. Most importantly, he had a clear alibi for the time period in which Tong went missing, effectively ruling him out as a suspect. Tong Shao's mysterious disappearance quickly became the center of attention on the Iowa State University campus and throughout the local community. Students, professors, and residents of Ames began spreading missing person flyers everywhere and sharing her information on social media, hoping someone might have seen her or known something. Based on car transaction data, statements from her roommates, and Tong's recent schedule, police traced evidence showing that on September 5, 2014, Tong Shao and Li Xiangnan had left Ames together for a weekend trip to Iowa City, about 130 miles away. They checked into room 218 at the Budget Inn and Suites, just as Tong had mentioned to her friends. When questioned, the hotel owner, a man named Ken, confirmed this information and said he recognized the couple because they had stayed there a few times before. According to him, everything during that particular stay seemed normal. There were no arguments or anything that struck him as suspicious. On September 6, 2014, hotel owner Ken recalled seeing Tong Shao walking alone around the lobby of the Budget Inn and Suites that morning. She appeared calm and showed no signs of distress. Later, security footage from a nearby gas station captured Tong and Li Xiangnan stopping to buy a few bottles of water before returning to the hotel. Everything in the video seemed normal. They were talking casually, with no arguments or anyone suspicious following them. However, by Sunday morning, September 7th, Ken noticed something unusual. Tong's Toyota Camry was no longer parked outside, and room 218, which they had rented, had been cleaned out and was empty. From his observation, he assumed the couple had probably left early in the morning without formally checking out. What puzzled him most was that the hotel's surveillance system happened to malfunction at that exact time, leaving no footage of their departure. Ken explained that while early checkouts weren't uncommon, in previous stays Tong and Li usually stayed until noon and often had to be reminded to leave. That's why their silent disappearance this time, without leaving a single trace, struck him as both strange and unsettling. As the official investigation expanded, authorities in Ames and Iowa City began searching Tong Shao's residence for any clues that might help determine her whereabouts. Inside her apartment, investigators found a purchase receipt for a 1997 Toyota Camry, which provided the vehicle's VIN and license plate number. This information was quickly shared with law enforcement agencies across the region to broaden the search. At the same time, investigators obtained search warrants for both Li Xiangnan's apartment and room 218 at the Budget Inn and Suites, where the two had stayed. When officers entered Li's apartment, they found the place in complete disarray, with belongings scattered everywhere as if he had hastily packed up and left. This led police to suspect that Li had departed Ames under suspicious circumstances. Meanwhile, inside the hotel room, investigators noticed several small, dark stains on the wall near the headboard, marks that appeared to be biological traces but were too faint for immediate confirmation. Because the room had already been rented to other guests after Tong and Li's stay, collecting reliable evidence became significantly more complicated. Investigators continued tracing Li Xiangnan's phone data, hoping that if the device was still in Tong Shao's possession, it could help them narrow down her location and expand the search area. However, after analyzing call logs and location data from September 5th through September 8th, 2014, they uncovered several suspicious inconsistencies. During that time, Li's phone made multiple calls to a man named Paul, most of which were registered in the Ames, Iowa area, with no indication whatsoever that the device had ever been in Minnesota, the place mentioned in the message supposedly sent by Tong. More notably, one of the last recorded calls originated from China, indicating that Li Xiangnan had left the United States much earlier than initially believed. This immediately shattered the theory that Tong had been the one using his phone. When detectives cross-checked the data, they found another critical detail. The text messages sent to Tong's friends claiming she was still in Iowa City had actually been transmitted from Chicago, Illinois. Flight records confirmed that Li Xiangnan had been at Chicago O'Hare Airport, waiting for a connecting flight. However, after his original flight was delayed, he traveled to Los Angeles, where he later boarded a plane back to China. The data provided clear evidence that it was Li Xiangnan himself who had been in possession of the phone all along, and that the messages sent under Tong Shao's name were nothing more than an elaborate deception meant to mislead everyone and buy him time to escape. Paul, who had received multiple consecutive calls from Li Xiangnan, was quickly brought in by police to clarify their connection. During questioning, Paul stated that Li had contacted him in early September, sounding hurried and tense. Li asked for his help in booking a plane ticket to China as soon as possible, saying he had a family emergency and needed to leave the United States immediately. Paul found the request strange, knowing that Li was still enrolled in classes at Iowa State University and that leaving so abruptly was highly unusual. When Paul asked if Li wanted a round-trip ticket, he flatly said no, making it clear he had no intention of returning to the U.S. anytime soon. This statement, combined with the flight records and the suspicious messages, allowed investigators to piece the timeline together. They concluded that something serious had happened to Tong Shao, and that Li Xiangnan was now the prime suspect in her disappearance. On September 26, 2014, police received a call reporting that Tong Shao's 1997 Toyota Camry had been found. The car had been left parked under a tree near an apartment complex on the outskirts of Iowa City, coincidentally, close to a building where Li Xiangnan had previously lived. Several residents in the area told officers that the car had been sitting there for weeks without anyone coming to claim it. And in recent days, a strong, unpleasant odor had begun emanating from inside, prompting them to contact the police. When officers arrived, they immediately secured the area and awaited a search warrant. Even before the vehicle was opened, the smell coming from the trunk suggested something was very wrong. Once the warrant was issued and the trunk was opened, investigators found a large suitcase inside, and the odor grew overwhelmingly stronger. Upon closer inspection, they discovered human remains in an advanced state of decomposition, along with a dumbbell and a towel with biological traces wrapped around the head area.
Well, at this point, we're not going to know for sure until we do the autopsy. Certainly, the time we spent looking for the vehicle took some time to figure out, what vehicle we were looking for. It's unfortunate it had been this way.
Although forensic results were still pending for official confirmation, investigators at the scene were almost certain that the remains found inside the suitcase belonged to Tong Shao.
Iowa State University student. An autopsy has now confirmed that a body that was found in Iowa City is that of Tong Shao. She was last seen in Iowa City September 8th. Police are not saying how she died. Tong Shao's body was found in the trunk of her own vehicle on Friday. Iowa City police now say they are looking for a person of interest identified as 23-year-old Jiangnan Li, a Chinese international student at the University of Iowa. The Iowa City Police Department believes that Li has returned to China now, but are still awaiting official confirmation.
The forensic examination later confirmed that Tong Shao had lost her life due to suffocation, combined with severe trauma from a strong impact. Experts could not determine the exact time of her passing, but based on the evidence, they believed Tong may have still been alive after the initial assault and only lost her life after being confined in the cramped space of the suitcase placed in the trunk. At the scene, police also found travel documents bearing Li Xiangnan's name, proving that he had booked a flight from the United States to China, along with Tong's shattered cell phone lying on the driver's seat, a clear sign of an attempt to destroy evidence. Once investigators were certain this was no longer a missing person case, they returned to the Budget Inn and Suites with a forensic team to thoroughly re-examine the room where the two had stayed. Luminol testing revealed multiple biological traces on the furniture, and notably, the towel with biological evidence found wrapped around Tong's head was confirmed to have originated from that same room. Footage from the security camera system provided police with a major breakthrough in the investigation. The video showed Li Xiangnan at a TJ Maxx store in Iowa City, where he spent a significant amount of time selecting a large suitcase, the same type later used to conceal Shan Thao remains. The footage captured him repeatedly comparing sizes, testing the handles on several suitcases, and after some hesitation, choosing one large enough to hold bulky items. He then went to a nearby Walmart, where he purchased 2 metal dumbbells, one of which was later discovered inside the suitcase in Tong's car trunk. While these details painted a clear picture of premeditation, investigators were still unable to determine what had caused a seemingly ordinary weekend trip to turn into a tragic crime within less than 48 hours.
Very few dry eyes here tonight for this somber ceremony as dozens of friends and fellow ISU students gathered here on the South Lawn on campus to honor Tong.
She will be remembered as a young girl who had been loved, cared for by her friends and family.
It is an honor to be able to work with international students like Tong.
James Dorsett has lost 2 international students in his 20 years as director of the program. He gave a heartfelt eulogy, and it wasn't long before he was overwhelmed by the memories of Tong and their very first conversation.
I tell myself that every time I go to the mall, when I see a Dippin' Dots ice cream place, I will remember her. And one day, perhaps when I have the courage to face my emotions, I will try the ice cream and keep my promise to her.
Tong's closest friend said it was still too soon to speak out about their beloved fellow Cyclone.
I smile every time when I think of seeing Tong for the first time.
And the final speaker this evening was a friend of Tong's family, a friend of her father, who traveled all the way from Virginia not only to pay her own final respects here at the memorial service tonight, but also to express deep gratitude on behalf of Tong's family for everyone in attendance tonight.
During the review of call records, police uncovered a crucial detail. Around the time Tong Shao was last seen, Li Xiangnan had made a phone call lasting more than 3 hours to a woman named Karen. When summoned for questioning, Karen revealed something that sent chills through the investigators. She explained that the call was not a normal conversation, but the moment when Li Xiangnan confessed he had accidentally overheard a private discussion between Tong and a close friend. According to him, on September 3rd, while Tong was on the phone expressing her desire to end their relationship and start a new life, he happened to call her at that exact moment. For reasons unknown, Tong's phone automatically picked up, allowing Li to listen to the entire 30-minute conversation. Karen said that after hearing everything, Li became consumed with anger and despair, repeatedly saying, "She betrayed me, she lied to me," before hanging up in an emotional breakdown. Shortly afterward, he posted a brief but haunting message on his social media page. "Damn my life." Based on the collected evidence, combined with the crime scene and the way Tong Shao was found inside the car, investigators concluded that this was not a spontaneous act, but a carefully planned scheme. Everything Li Xiangnan did, from purchasing the suitcase, choosing one of the right size, buying 2 dumbbells, to preparing his plane ticket out of the United States, showed clear premeditation and an intent to conceal evidence. According to police theories, the dumbbell found inside the suitcase was part of a failed plan. Lee had intended to use its weight to sink the suitcase in the Skunk River. Analysis of Lee's cell phone location data revealed that between 3 and 4 a.m., he had been in the area near the Skunk River, not far from Ames, Iowa. Investigators believe that during this time, he drove there in an attempt to dispose of the evidence but realized the water level was too shallow, forcing him to abandon the plan. Unable to throw the suitcase into the river as intended, Li Xiangnan decided instead to leave it in the trunk of Tong's car before fleeing Iowa City. From all the evidence gathered, police were able to reconstruct the full timeline of the case, a heartbreaking sequence of events meticulously planned by Li Xiangnan after he secretly overheard Tong Shao's private conversation. Consumed by jealousy and anger, he began preparing his actions. On September 5, 2014, Tong and Li traveled together to the Budget Inn and Suites in Iowa City, checking into room 218 as planned for their weekend trip. On September 6, Li was captured on security cameras at TJ Maxx purchasing a large suitcase and later at Walmart buying 2 dumbbells. That same day, he also booked a one-way flight to China, revealing that his departure from the United States had been premeditated. It was also the last day Tong Shao was seen alive. On September 7th, after the tragedy occurred, Li returned to his apartment in Iowa City, packed his belongings, and prepared to leave. Cell phone location data showed he drove to the Skunk River area, where he attempted to dispose of the suitcase. But when he discovered the water was too shallow, he abandoned the plan and left the suitcase in the trunk of Tong's car instead. He then used his own phone to impersonate Tong, sending text messages to her father and friends to mislead them into believing she was safe and traveling in Minnesota. On September 8th, Li was spotted at Chicago O'Hare Airport, where he purchased a connecting ticket to Los Angeles, and the following day, he boarded a flight back to China, officially fleeing the United States. The calculated and emotionless chain of actions turned Tong Shao's case into one of the most shocking tragedies in the history of international students in Iowa. It wasn't until March 2015, nearly 6 months after the case had been solved, that an official arrest warrant for Li Xiangnan was issued. However, by that time, he had long since left the United States and was already in China. This presented a major obstacle for the investigation, as there was no criminal extradition treaty between the United States and China, meaning U.S. authorities could not request his return for trial. This left investigators feeling powerless and deeply concerned that justice might never be served, because even though the evidence was overwhelming, they had no legal means to prosecute the person responsible for Tong Shao's tragic case on American soil.
Even a world away, this case is on the minds of many and making headlines in Chinese culture. I spoke with a professor tonight studying Chinese culture. He says that if there's enough public outcry over there about this case, he says that could potentially bring the person of interest, who is Xiangnan Li, back here to American soil.
Girl's family, for instance, if the parents want to seek justice, and they may use public opinion on the internet to press the government to cooperate with the United States.
Kevin, before he became president of the World Food Prize, Dr. Kenneth Quinn was ambassador to Cambodia and worked for the U.S. State Department for over 30 years. He says the willingness of the Chinese to help find and hold Li for questioning might come down to one word: reciprocity, as in, if we help you, what will you do for us?
So if it's a question of, are we going to give in to this American demand and hand over one of our citizens,
Well, the answer to that is no, because it's not reciprocated. I think the Chinese would not be interested in protecting a murderer.
This is their citizen that has been killed in another country. They will certainly want to have that resolved.
Ambassador Quinn says one possible scenario could be the Chinese requesting to run this case through their own legal system, since the person of interest and the victim are both their citizens. He says he doubts the Chinese would just turn Lee over to the U.S., but as you heard Quinn say, there could be some diplomatic solutions, more informal ideas where both governments agree to something beneficial for both sides.
Detective Gonzalez, the lead investigator on the case, immediately made it his mission to pursue justice for Tong Shao and her family. He emphasized that the message he wanted to send was that no matter where the victim came from or where the suspect fled, we will not stop. Together with the Iowa County Attorney's Office, he initiated the necessary diplomatic channels, reaching out to the Chinese embassy and other relevant agencies to request international cooperation in the investigation. After exchanging preliminary evidence, Chinese authorities agreed to collaborate, assisting in locating and prosecuting the suspect. They also released an official statement to the media, which made the case a national topic in China. Public outrage quickly spread across social media, with images and hashtags calling for the search for Li Xiangnan. The massive online campaign created significant public pressure that helped accelerate international cooperation. Meanwhile, Tong's family suffered devastating emotional and physical consequences. Her father's health deteriorated severely, and their grief further fueled the determination of the investigative team. All of these diplomatic, legal, and media efforts became crucial pieces that moved the case toward the next phase of prosecution, ensuring that the victim's voice would not be forgotten. By May 2015, after several months in hiding in the city of Wenzhou, Zhejiang province, Li Xiangnan finally surrendered to Chinese authorities, realizing there was no other way to escape. Shortly afterward, Chinese officials requested that Iowa authorities provide the complete case files, evidence, and investigation results so the case could be transferred to China's legal system in accordance with national law. By June 2015, Li Xiangnan was officially arrested and charged in China with the intentional deprivation of another person's life, a serious offense under the country's criminal code. After nearly a year of detention and investigation, Li confessed to the crime but attempted to minimize his responsibility, claiming he had acted in a moment of loss of control and impulsive emotion. He stated that an argument had broken out between him and Tong Shao, and in a fit of agitation, he overreacted, insisting that it had been an act of excessive self-defense rather than premeditation. In his testimony, he also said that he still loved Tong and was heartbroken that she no longer felt the same way, trying to portray himself as someone who made a terrible mistake in a moment of emotion, rather than a person who acted with intent. The trial of Li Xiangnan moved quickly and concluded in just 6 hours, so brief that many felt it did not fully reflect the gravity of the tragic case. Court rules prevented Tong Shao's parents from being present in the courtroom to avoid influencing the proceedings. Nevertheless, in a moment of unbearable pain, Tong's mother lost control, rushing to the courtroom door in a state of panic, crying and shouting that her life no longer had meaning and that she felt nothing but bitterness and loss. Afterwards, Li's parents met with Tong's parents, bowed and apologized on their son's behalf, pleading for forgiveness and agreeing to compensate the family with 2 million renminbi, approximately $300,000, as restitution. Under Chinese criminal law, the penalty for intentionally causing another person's death can range from 10 years in prison up to the most severe sentences, and Tong's family asked the court to impose the harshest possible punishment. Tong's father, in a single bitter sentence in Chinese, said, "The person who caused this tragedy must pay for his actions with his life."
Murder investigation that shocked eastern Iowans and crossed international borders is a closed case tonight.
Former University of Iowa student 24-year-old Zhang Yan Li will spend the rest of his life in a Chinese prison for killing his girlfriend. He murdered.
By June 2016, after the trial process, Li Xiangnan was officially sentenced to life imprisonment in China for the intentional deprivation of another person's life in the tragic case of Tong Shao. Under Chinese law, this sentence may be eligible for reduction to about 13 years if the inmate demonstrates good behavior and genuine rehabilitation. However, this depends on the evaluation of correctional authorities and the final decision of the court.
I was very pleased with the outcome. He received the sentence he would have received had he been convicted of the same offense in Iowa. And so it felt like justice was served in China the same way it would have been served in the United States. I felt that the evidence was very strong in the case, so I wasn't surprised at all at the outcome, but was pleased that he wasn't given a lesser sentence, or frankly that he was given a harsher sentence of the death penalty, because he would not have been subjected to that in Iowa. So having him receive the same sentence he would have received in Iowa, I thought was appropriate.
The verdict brought no peace to Tong Shao's family. News of the sentencing left her parents completely devastated. Her father, in particular, was so overcome with grief that his health deteriorated severely, to the point where doctors advised him not to travel long distances to the United States to bring his daughter's ashes home. Their pain came not only from the loss itself, but also from witnessing the shattered dreams of their only child, a young woman who had left China full of hope and ambition, end in such a cruel tragedy. Across the ocean, detectives in Iowa stated that the case had become a historic precedent, opening a new path for cooperation between the United States and China in cross-border criminal investigations, especially those involving international students. The county attorney also emphasized the number of Chinese students coming to study in the Midwest, particularly in Iowa City, continues to grow, and it is vital that they feel safe, protected, and confident that justice will stand with them if anything ever goes wrong. Tong Shao, 19 years old, was a brave, hard-working, and determined young woman. She made a courageous decision to leave her hometown of Dalian and come to the United States, driven by a desire to challenge herself, expand her knowledge, and make her family proud. During her time at Iowa State University, Tong not only achieved impressive academic success, but also left a lasting mark on those around her with her sincerity, kindness, and positive energy that brightened every room she entered. Her friends remember her radiant smile, her ability to make others laugh, and her gentle heart that was always ready to listen and share tears when someone needed a shoulder to lean on. Even now, her close roommate Jean still keeps with her the prayer book that Tong once gave as a gift. She marked the page on the last day she saw Tong, where the words read, "Lord, keep my focus on you as I walk the path ahead. Even when it seems filled with obstacles I cannot overcome. Remind me that I do not walk alone, but with those who share my purpose in you." Jean says she finds comfort in that very prayer and feels that her beloved friend Tong Shao is still with her, a symbol of kindness, courage, and faith. Though she is no longer in this world, the light she carried has never faded. The story of Tong Shao is not just a true crime documentary retelling a heartbreaking case. It is a profound reminder of the fragility of trust and the importance of recognizing the signs of control in relationships. From a young woman full of dreams and ambition, Tong became a symbol of courage and determination to rise above challenges. Yet her tragedy leaves us with an invaluable lesson that love should never come with control, jealousy, or possession, and that silence in the face of harmful behavior can sometimes lead to irreversible consequences. Always listen to your instincts, set healthy boundaries, and never hesitate to seek help when you feel unsafe. Thank you for taking the time to watch today's story in True Crime Documentary. If you were moved by Tong Shao's journey, one filled with strength, hope, and loss, please share this video and leave a comment below as a tribute to her memory. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support us in continuing to bring you real stories where justice, humanity, and the memory of innocent victims are always honored. We'll see you in the next episode of True Crime Documentary, where every story is a reminder of the power of truth and compassion.